Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am Chris Crahansel. I mentioned that a little bit earlier, and I have the privilege of overseeing the business development and the client engagement efforts here at Biologics Consulting. We just want to take a moment to say thank you for joining us for this webinar that's going to be presented real soon. And our discussion today is about how to elevate your non-clinical safety data review and decision making. And so once again, we're grateful that you came, joined us, and are tuning in. There will be some time at the end of today's panel discussion for Q&A. And as you'll notice at the top of your screen, there is a place where it says Q&A, and you can ask your questions by clicking that icon. And we also want to strongly encourage you to reach out to today's presenters if you have any additional questions after our time is over today. So here at Biologics Consulting, we do what we do for the good of public health. And so thank you once again for joining us. And without further delay, allow me to introduce you to our panel discussion panelists today, and that would be Bruce Pierce, Lori Echek, David Pepperell, and Chris Scull. And they're all part of our non-clinical toxicology business unit here at Biologics Consulting. And so I'm going to pass it over to Bruce. So Bruce, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I'll call up the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, thank you all for joining us. We're really excited about this opportunity to talk about a new addition to our consultancy, contributing to the Biologics Advantage. And this is the analysis of preclinical safety data and visualizations using the same powerful tool used by FDA reviewers. And this is a program, a software called Send Explorer, which is a validated web-based software that we currently have access to provide this addition to our consultancy, which we believe is extremely important. As most of you on this webinar know, FDA requires send data. They insist on having send data to accompany each of the toxicology studies submitted to FDA. Not all of the studies are required, but most of the studies require send data now, and eventually all of them will be. And you cannot get, as many of you already know, your toxicology reports through the electronic gateway without having the appropriate send data file. And FDA insists on this because it's extremely important to them in their ability to really understand and interrogate your data. However, most sponsors rely on the data provided by their CRO in the form of study reports to assess their safety data. And in general, CROs do not conduct in-depth analysis and interpretation beyond the classical reporting of data that we're used to in these reports. However, the data provided in the study report is really not in a format that's conducive to in-depth analysis. And requests for additional data analysis are often associated with unacceptable delays impacting timelines and submissions, just not generally built into timelines before these studies are conducted. However, FDA does not rely solely on CRO final reports nor what sponsors put into Module 2. They require, as I've noted, that the data is provided to them in a very specific format, that is SEND format, permitting in-depth analysis. And after the time that we've had working with the Send Explorer tool, we see the enormous power in this tool and why FDA requires this to view send data. And the importance of this is perhaps punctuated by this slide that I've taken from an FDA presentation, which shows that what they do first after they receive the data, they, in their words, immediately after receiving the submission data, they put this into Send Explorer, and they give reviewers access to this for visualization, query, and data summarization. And without exaggerating, this is a quantum leap above what we classically have been doing in terms of analyzing safety data. However, the sponsor must be the expert. It's assumed that the sponsor is expert regarding the chemistry of the drug, the pharmacodynamic properties, therapeutic mechanism, and mode of action. And the sponsor must also be the expert in product safety and risk. FDA expects a thorough understanding of safety and risk, as they should. The majority of sponsors are blind, however, to what FDA reviewers can see and detect, the trends readily visible in Send Explore. In our experience, it is rare that a sponsor has the equivalent insight without using Send Explore. Classically, the flow of information from the CRO to FDA is depicted in this slide. Generally, the CRO will provide via portals data, tables, and summary of fundamental or rudimentary summaries for the monitoring and review and the progress of a study. Of course, the CRO provides draft and final reports to the sponsor and also provides a Send data set, which sponsors have very limited capabilities of viewing. And even with a Send viewer, unless you understand what's in there in the format for the data, it's almost uninterpretable. And generally, what is done is the final report is combined with the Send data file and put into the submission and sent to FDA. So again, sponsors are effectively blind to what FDA is able to see because they put this data immediately into Send Explore and begin interrogating it. And the more issues that there are, safety concerns with the data in terms of the observations, the greater the risk for the sponsor by not having access to this ability to interrogate the data. And what we're doing now is we're offering the opportunity for biologics, as depicted here in this diagram, the dark blue segment, to look at data provided by the CRO in various formats, Apollo, Provantis, Prostima, and of course in Send files, and use that data to analyze the relationships using Send Explore for analysis, safety signal, and trends identification, and report this with visualizations from single studies or multiple studies in a report, and we'll provide this to the sponsor. And the sponsor can incorporate some of this information into the final GLP tox study reports in agreement with the CRO and included in their submissions to FDA. And we believe that having the ability to interrogate this data with Send Explore ensures that the sponsor has a greater than or equal to understanding of safety data to FDA, and this contributes to a decrease in risk for them. And our goal is to ensure that they have a greater understanding of the safety data, that they are indeed always the expert in the safety data. So our goal is to decrease risk associated with both development and regulatory part of this process, where, as I indicated in the diagram, we're able to evaluate the data during development. When data is provided from the CRO in the appropriate format, this will allow us to help scientists to communicate succinctly the findings of their study to other scientists, provide the sponsor science with real-time, in-depth examination of data, provide the ability to track potential toxicities and target organ effects, which may be associated with their particular class of drug that's being tested, permit comparison to previous studies, permit midstream study modification or optimization of results to avoid costly mistakes, facilitate optimization of pivotal GLP study design by providing more in-depth understanding of the data that they already have from previous studies and dose range finding studies, and incorporation of these insights and visualizations from this analysis in the CRO final reports in collaboration with the CRO. And most importantly, provide analysis of single and multiple studies based on draft and final send data files, which allow us to identify trends in the data, flag observations of interest, better describe and understand relationships within and across studies for a whole program, if desired. Provide in-depth and comprehensive analysis of data, visualizations for clear communications of these observations and reports and regulatory submissions. Permit interrogation of the data to ensure the sponsor is truly the expert in product safety. Facilitate accurate understanding of requests for information from FDA. I talked to a toxicologist about this recently after presenting the what we do here. And he said, I could never really understand how FDA was able to ferret out these relationships that we didn't see. And one reason is because they are using this same tool that allows them to powerfully interrogate their data. And we believe this will contribute to rapid sponsor responses and minimizing potential delays in clinical hold. It will facilitate that process. And report data. This is an important fact. Report data using visualizations from SendExplore. Familiar with FDA reviewers that they're able to confirm using this same tool. So the important point here overall is FDA insists on interrogating your send data sets. And we believe, particularly after working with this tool, that sponsors should also insist on this. Myself and my colleagues will now provide, with the limited time that we have, some examples of why this is important. And I'll turn it over right now to David Pepperell.
Great, thanks, Bruce. Now, I'm just going to show you an example here of one of the visualizations you might see in SendExplorer. This first example is just one visualization summarizing a portion of the microscopic pathology findings from a single repeat dose toxicology study in rats. Now, in this case, please note that these results are solely for the male animals. I know that these the numbers and letters are pretty small to read, but in this view of the data, the severity of the findings is the microscopic findings is color coded from green being unremarkable to red being severe. Across the top, you'll see the highlighted areas are the treatment dose groups, the treatment versus recovery animals, as well as the animal numbers and gender. Again, all being male data in this case. There would be a separate page or separate sheet entirely for the female data. Now, while this specific view really only shows a few tissues, what becomes immediately apparent is that while many tissues are unremarkable, indicated in green, the green boxes, you can quickly see where there are findings. And in this case, this is in both the bone marrow along the top left and the epididymis. What's more, you can readily detect dose dependence of these findings based on the heat map coloring seen here for the bone marrow, trending from green in control to a higher frequency and severity of the findings, and as well as a clear dose dependency of these findings. Lastly, by comparing excuse me, the main study and recovery groups, you can also quickly see that there was recovery of these findings in the bone marrow, whereas for the epididymis, recovery was not readily apparent. Next slide. So what this really affords the reviewer then is the ability to quickly look at all the tissues along the left-hand side, all the dose groups together along the top, as well as individual animal data for both the main study and recovery, and of course, data for both genders. So then the real power in looking at the data in even just this one view is that it allows you, the sponsor, to rapidly identify key tissues of interest, dose dependency of any toxicity, potential recovery of these findings, as well as individual animal data, with the added benefit of being able to flag and specifically follow those highlighted animals that exhibit safety findings. Now, keep in mind that this visualization is just a single visualization for the histopathology findings from a single rodent study. Next, my colleague Chris Scull is going to highlight one of the real utilities of looking at your SEND data in this way, the ability to correlate data across different study endpoints and even across different studies. Chris?
Thanks, David. As you can see here, it's another great example of how we can start to look for relationships within your tox study data using this tool. David had mentioned color coding. It's a little hard to see on this slide, but one thing we can actually do is color code individual histopathology observations on the same slide where we're presenting clinical pathology data. So in the example you see here, these are AST measurements for individual animals, as well as the group average and standard deviations. Each row in this slide is an individual study that had its own SEND data set. So this allows us to, first of all, distinguish between potential outliers or determine if there's an actual trend, as you can drill down to an individual animal and see if it had, at a quick glance, severe or mild correlating histopathology findings in the liver, for example. Since we have multiple studies on the slide here, you can also line the studies up by dose. You can see in the fourth line down there, there was an intermediate dose that wasn't used in other studies. It allows you to, again, look at trends across studies rather than looking at one study report at a time. So this will really help us dig into your data and identify some of these trends before they go to the FDA. And this is not something you can easily do from a study report that just provides this data as tables or a pathology report that describes histopathology findings in a text format or even in a tabulated format. So this is a great way that we can pull this data out quickly and identify this trend for you. We can also correlate it with either the dose level or the sex of the mice or the sex of the animals, and as mentioned before, between individual and multiple studies. Another example, Bruce, if you can go to the next slide, is to look at the visualizations of your clinical observations. I know oftentimes you get a study report and it tabulates, again, the number of clinical observations, but the tables can be hundreds and hundreds of pages long. We can pull this data out for you and look at it, again, in terms of the dose, as well as a time course of clinical observations based on the study day. In this example that you see here, we can separate out males from females, and in this case, the males are on the top row, and in this example, you can see the blue and green bars that indicate a higher number of clinical observations towards the middle of the studies that was observed in males but not females, also in the intermediate doses, whereas in the females, this was only seen at the high dose, this higher incidence of clinical observations. So this allows us to pull this data out quickly and again, get ahead of any observations or conclusions an FDA reviewer might make from analyzing your SEND data sets. We can also create these visualizations to be included in your regulatory submission summary documents. Again, this would be a format that the reviewers are very familiar with and they can recreate on their own, but it can also help drive your messaging and your conclusions about these studies. So if you're not looking at your SEND data sets the same way the FDA is, again, the point here is that you could potentially miss an interpretation or a trend and be surprised later on during FDA review. So let me pass it back over to Bruce. I think he's going to show some of this tool in action and a couple more examples.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Before I go to the next slide, I'm not sure this is going to start automatically when I switch to the slide. The next slide looks at the relationship between exposure and histopathological results. And the thing I want you to keep in mind, if the video runs properly, is what it would take for you to do the same thing that can be done in just minutes using this particular tool. I'll go to the next slide. This is a short video. There we go. Showing the relationship between exposure and histopathological endpoints. In this case, it's a repeat dose tox study in dogs, and we're looking at the histopathology in the lung. And so follow the pointer as it goes through and makes selections and changes here. This is a scatter plot looking at exposure versus dose for the lung. And you can see here that we could select any tissue and look at any tissue that we wanted here and do the same thing. The histopathology, again, is color-coded as it's been in the other ones. And when you run over each one of these, it highlights the animals in that group. And we can also include the particular histopathology there. We can separate these out, identify which are males and females in this group. We can add information about statistics, and you can hover over this and see the statistics, or you can add a table on the bottom summarizing the statistics. One of the things you see here in this data is there appears to be a difference between males and females. And we can very quickly modify the graph by adding seconds to the x-axis and pull out a more clear presentation of this difference between males and females. We can also ask the question of, well, where did we collect these data in the course of the study? Were they data from the terminal animals, the recovery, or were there animals that died on study? We can see here that there were 3 animals in the high dose group of males consistent with increased sensitivity that were moribund, and 1 female. And we click on that 1 female, and it pulls up a table. And the check marks identify the animal in that table. And if we click on the link in the table for that animal, it takes us to a summary of all the data for that particular individual animal, including the clinical chemistry, the clinical observations, and the histopathology. And it presents the particular data for each one of these things over the course, these observations over the course of the study. And if we look at ALT, for example, when we graph this, we also have the ability to take a look at the response for the individual animal, the ALT levels for that 1 moribund female compared to all of the other animals, all the other females in the study. So we've gone from this high-level summary down to the data, specific data for the individual animal in this study. And we can also, in addition, there are many different kinds of plots that we can provide for the data. For example, we can plot according to sex. We can separate out the data for males and females, or we can plot this according to disposition. And you think about what it would take for you now, classically taking a more classic approach to this, to be able to present and represent the data like this and do this analysis that can be done in minutes. Okay, and I'll stop there and pass this on to Lori for a discussion of how we can use this program to deal with historical control data. Take it away, Lori.
Yeah, hi, everyone. I wanted to talk a little bit about not only historic control data, but also your vehicle data. As we know in today's world, vehicles can be many different things. They can be very complex and unique. It can be anything from saline to lipid nanoparticle, or also a unique adjuvant or formulary you need for a small molecule in order to maintain an exposure. So using this tool, we can help you to understand your control data. We can look at different species. What's on the screen is looking at cholesterol for several different species, rat in blue, dog in purple, and then monkey in green. And in this case, we've separated out males and females. This will allow us to work with you to look at data across studies. So for example, if you come to us and we're working with you to build your end of phase 2 document, you might have studies that were done at different CROs. So your 4-month studies perhaps were done at one CRO, and then your chronic toxicology studies were done at another. Those CROs are going to have different historic controls, and also your vehicle controls may be different. So we can help you to look across that data and understand if there's any patterns coming out in the vehicle that will then help us to understand your treatment animals. Another important area for that type of an evaluation would be non-human primate studies. Oftentimes you might have to have your primates from different countries of origin. In that case, we can help you look at the vehicle control data from each country of origin and help you understand what are true changes that are being caused by your test article versus changes that may occur because the monkeys are from a different country of origin in your, for example, your 4-month versus your more chronic toxicity studies. Another place where this might come into play is if you come to us and we're helping you build a drug master file. So in fact, your vehicle may be something that you want to build a drug master file for, if it's a LNP or a unique adjuvant. In that case, we can utilize your control data and look across different species, different genders, and understand what effects are being caused by the LNP itself. And then we can build that into the non-clinical section of your drug master file. Then it can also help you to understand the CRO control data. So sometimes we are in a situation where there's a reported finding and the CRO will indicate that that's within their historic control limits. So we can help you evaluate that data to understand how to respond to the FDA if they come back with questions regarding that control data and the strength of that control data. So these are just a few different areas where we can look at the control data and we could help understand it as a control, but also if that vehicle control is actually part of your product. So a unique formulary or an LNP or something like an adjuvant for a cancer treatment vaccine or for a prophylactic infectious disease vaccine. So now I'm just going to turn it back over to Bruce for some closing statements.
Okay, thank you, Lori. Thank you very much. As by way of summary, the Biologics Advantage provides sponsors with what FDA insists upon. That is, provide safety data interrogation with the same validated program, Send Explorer. Ensure that the sponsor's in-depth understanding of their safety data is equal to or equivalent to FDA. And we strive to ensure that it's greater than the understanding of FDA, and they are the experts in their safety and the risk associated with their product. Provide the ability to report data in the SEND format, familiar to FDA reviewers. This facilitates FDA reviewers' ability to independently confirm sponsor findings and conclusions, and contributes, we believe, to FDA reviewer confidence in the data, and decreases the risk of clinical holds and other program delays. So thank you very much for taking this time to listen to us today about this new service that we're offering to our clients that we're really excited about. And I hope that we've punctuated the importance of having this kind of look at your data before submitting your safety data to FDA. And if you're interested in contacting us, You can scan the QR code here, or you can we have a main contact email, or you can contact any one of the presenters today. Again, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Bruce, David, Chris, and Lori. We really appreciate the information. And we'll keep that slide up there so people can jot down the email addresses and also take a picture of the QR code if they wish to contact us that way. But we'll open it up for Q&A. We have a few minutes for that, if there are any. At the top of your screen, you'll see where it says Q&A. You can actually click on that icon and just type your question in for our group if you have a question related to today. But besides that, we'll just wait to see if we have any comments that come in. Will a copy of the slide deck or summary be shared with the participants? Bruce, what do you think?
Yes, we can do that. In fact, we can provide a link to anyone that requests a copy of the slide deck, and we'll post the slide deck on our website.
Great. Great. Thank you for the question.
Bruce, I don't know if in the interim, while we wait for any other questions, one question I think I had from someone else I was describing this to was, you know, when can an analysis like this be done on somebody's send data, or if they're trying to understand their program, when is the time to get in touch with us or reach out to be doing this type of work?
You know, one of the time points that may be most important is just before doing the submission, to give us the option of providing a mock FDA review of the submission. This is for a IND submission and end of phase 2 NDA or BLA submission, giving us the opportunity to go through this and provide a report on what we can see using Send Explorer and issues of interest or issues that the sponsor should pay attention to and perhaps address as a part of their submission. You know, our preference is as early as possible to contact us and get us involved, particularly as I mentioned, we have the option of using the data in Pristima or Apollo, et cetera, to begin the review of the safety data. I think that this helps to de-risk the program. We can identify issues, particularly if a sponsor has a product where it has known toxicities and they want to identify whether or not their particular, their candidate displays these toxicities or shows a superior safety profile.
Yeah, I would just also mention I had another client as well that delayed a submission, and so that there's also an opportunity there to, as you said, look earlier in cases where there may have been toxicity in one study but not another, or at one dose level but not another. This is a powerful way to look across the program and help guide some of those decisions about whether an additional study might be needed or change in dose or things like that. So certainly something we could help with earlier as well.
Yes.
Well, if there are no other questions or any comments in the chat, we will conclude our time today. So on behalf of our team, again, I'm Chris Krahansel, and we are glad that you could join us today. And once again, if there's any questions or any comments or you need some assistance, we are a end-to-end FDA regulatory and product development consulting firm for biologics, pharmaceuticals, and even medical devices. And if there's a way that we could support you or help you, please contact us. We would like to have an introductory conversation and see where that goes. So once again, on behalf of everyone here, I'm Chris Krahansel, and thank you for joining us today. Have a great day.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.